The stagecoach rattled to a stop, dust billowing around its wheels as Zara Dawson clutched her small valise with trembling fingers. It was July 1875, and after 3 days of bone-jarring travel, she had finally arrived in Ordway, Colorado, a town that until 6 weeks ago she'd never even heard of. "Last stop, Ordway," the driver called out, already busy unloading trunks and parcels from the roof. Zara stepped down carefully, her boots meeting the packed dirt of what passed for Ordway's main street. The frontier town sprawled before her, raw and unpolished, a collection of wooden buildings, some with false fronts trying to appear more substantial than they were. Men in dusty clothes eyed her curiously as she stood alone, looking lost amid the bustle of the arriving coach. "Miss Dawson?" The deep voice startled her. She turned to find a tall man regarding her with clear blue eyes. His face was tanned from the sun, with lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of squinting across vast open spaces. Unlike many of the men loitering nearby, he was clean-shaven, though his brown hair was slightly overgrown, curling at his collar. "Mr. Russell?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the street noise. He nodded, removing his hat. "Ethan Russell, madam. Welcome to Ordway." His eyes flicked briefly to the gold band she wore on her finger, the one she'd purchased in St. Louis to ward off unwanted attention during her journey. Zara swallowed hard. This man, this stranger, was to be her husband in 3 days' time, according to their correspondence. "I've got the wagon just down the street," he said, reaching for her valise. "Is this all your baggage?" "Yes," she admitted. "I didn't have much to bring." If Ethan was disappointed by her lack of possessions, he didn't show it. "That's all right. Less to carry." He led her to a sturdy wagon hitched to two well-groomed horses. After helping her up onto the seat, he climbed up beside her and took the reins. "My ranch is about 7 miles out of town," he explained, as they pulled away from the bustle of Ordway's main street. "It's not much to look at compared to some, but the land's good. I've got about 60 head of cattle and some decent grazing rights on the north side of the creek." Zara nodded, struggling to find her voice. The endless prairie stretched around them, so different from the crowded streets of Philadelphia where she'd spent her whole life. "You're quieter than your letters," Ethan observed after they'd traveled in silence for nearly a mile. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "It's just, everything is so different here." His expression softened. "No need to apologize. Must be a shock, coming all this way to marry a man you've never met." The directness of his statement made her stomach tighten. "Mr. Russell." "Ethan, please." "Ethan," she corrected herself. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have mentioned in my letters, but I was afraid you might change your mind about bringing me here." He glanced at her, his hands steady on the reins. "I'm listening." Zara took a deep breath. "I can't have children. There was a fever when I was 16. The doctor said afterward that I would never be able to bear children." The words tumbled out quickly, as if saying them faster would make them less devastating. "I understand if you want to cancel our arrangement. I can find work in town until I earn enough for a ticket back east." Ethan was quiet for so long that Zara was certain he was trying to find a gentle way to reject her. Then, to her surprise, he smiled a genuine smile that transformed his weathered face. "Then love will be enough," he said simply. Zara stared at him, certain she had misheard. "But most men want heirs, children to carry on their name, to work the land." "I reckon most men want a lot of things they don't need," Ethan replied, his eyes on the horizon. "What I need is a partner, not just a mother for children I don't have, someone to share the days with." Tears pricked at Zara's eyes and she quickly looked away, not wanting him to see how deeply his acceptance had touched her. "My ranch house isn't fancy," he continued, giving her time to compose herself, "but I built it solid. 3 rooms for now, though I've been planning to add another. There's a garden out back not doing too well, I'll admit. Never had much luck with vegetables. I know a bit about gardening, Zara offered, grateful for the change of subject. My mother kept a kitchen garden. That would be a blessing, Ethan said. Living on beef and beans gets tiresome after a while. As they crested a small rise, Ethan's ranch came into view. The house was modest but well built, with a barn and corral nearby. Smoke rose from the chimney. Mrs. Potter's there, Ethan explained. Widow from town who's been helping me get things ready. She'll stay on for a few days if you'd like. Thought you might appreciate another woman around while you settle in. The consideration behind this gesture wasn't lost on Zara. That's very thoughtful. I want you to be comfortable here, he said, pulling the wagon to a stop in front of the house. I know this isn't what you're used to. You don't know what I'm used to, she said softly. Ethan studied her face. No, I suppose I don't. We've got a lot to learn about each other, don't we? Mrs. Potter emerged from the house, a stout woman with gray hair pulled into a severe bun. Her sharp eyes took in Zara's travel-worn appearance, but her smile was kind. So you're the bride, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Come in, child. I've got supper nearly ready, and you look like you could use a wash and a rest. Inside, the house was surprisingly comfortable. Simple furniture, much of it clearly handmade, filled the main room. A fireplace dominated one wall, with shelves holding a few books, an unexpected luxury on the frontier. The bedroom's through there, Mrs. Potter said, gesturing to a door. I've put fresh linens on the bed. Ethan will sleep in the barn until after the wedding. Zara felt her cheeks flush. In the rush to confess her inability to have children, she hadn't thought about the more immediate aspects of their arrangement. The preacher comes through town on Saturday, Ethan explained, setting her valise down. I thought we could be married then, if that suits you. 3 days to prepare herself to marry this stranger. 3 days to decide if she'd made a terrible mistake in coming here. That will be fine, she said, because what other answer could she give? That night, after a simple but satisfying meal, Zara sat on the edge of the bed in what would soon be her marital bedroom. Mrs. Potter had retired to the small third room, and Ethan had excused himself to the barn. Through the window, she could see the vast canopy of stars, more brilliant than she'd ever seen in Philadelphia. She wondered what her parents would think if they could see her now. Both had died within months of each other 2 years ago, leaving her alone with mounting debts and few prospects. When her cousin had shown her the newspaper advertisement, "Rancher seeks bride, must be honest, hardworking, and of good character," it had seemed like her only chance for a future. Now, looking around the room that would be hers, she felt a glimmer of hope. Ethan Russell might be a stranger, but he was a kind one, and his acceptance of her greatest flaw was more than she had dared to wish for. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the calico curtains. Zara dressed quickly and found Mrs. Potter already at work in the kitchen. "Good morning, dear," the older woman greeted her. "Ethan's been up for hours. Men's work doesn't wait for daylight out here. He said to tell you he'll be back midday." Zara nodded, eager to make herself useful. "What can I do to help?" By the time Ethan returned, Zara had helped prepare breakfast, learned the basics of the kitchen stove, and begun taking inventory of the household supplies, her sleeves rolled up and hair tucked under a kerchief. She was kneeling in the garden, assessing what might be salvaged among the struggling plants. "You've been busy," Ethan observed, approaching with a bucket of water from the well. Zara looked up, shielding her eyes from the sun. "I hope you don't mind. I thought I might be able to save some of these tomatoes with regular watering." "Mind? I'm grateful." He set the bucket down beside her. "Most of these plants gave up on me weeks ago." As they worked together in the garden, Zara found herself relaxing in Ethan's company. His movements were deliberate, his manner straightforward. When he spoke, it was with purpose, rather than idle chatter. "How did you end up in Colorado?" she asked as they moved to the shade of a cottonwood tree for a brief rest. Came west after the war, he answered, his expression momentarily distant. Served with the Union. Afterward, Pennsylvania felt too crowded with memories. He glanced at her. You're from Philadelphia, right? Yes, Zara confirmed. Born and raised there. What made you answer an advertisement from a stranger halfway across the country? The directness of his question caught her off guard, but she appreciated his honesty. After my parents died, I had few options. I worked as a seamstress, but the pay was barely enough to survive on. When my landlord raised the rent again, she shrugged. I had to choose between starving in a familiar place or taking a chance on an unfamiliar one. Ethan nodded slowly. Fair enough. Though I reckon there are easier paths than marrying a rancher you've never met. Perhaps, she acknowledged, but your letters seemed sincere. You didn't make grand promises or paint a picture of luxury. I appreciated that. A faint smile touched his lips. Not much point in starting with lies. Life out here is hard enough without false expectations. The days leading up to the wedding passed quickly, filled with domestic tasks and cautious conversations as Zara and Ethan circled each other, testing boundaries and discovering common ground. Mrs. Potter proved an invaluable buffer, her practical wisdom and occasional sharp humor easing moments of awkwardness between the soon-to-be spouses. On the third day, Ethan's nearest neighbor, Jim Hawkins, rode over with his wife Martha and their 3 children. The Hawkins family lived 4 miles away, practically next door by frontier standards. So you're the mail-order bride, Martha said warmly, embracing Zara as if they were old friends. Thank the Lord. I've been praying Ethan would find someone. Too many men out here turn strange without good company. The Hawkins children, 2 boys and a girl ranging from 6 to 12, stared at Zara with undisguised curiosity. Are you really going to marry Mr. Russell tomorrow? The oldest boy asked. Tommy, his mother scolded, mind your manners. It's all right, Zara assured her. Yes, I am going to marry Mr. Russell tomorrow. But you just met him, the girl said, her freckled face scrunched in confusion. Zara glanced at Ethan, who was talking with Jim near the corral. Sometimes people meet and just know they're meant to be together, she said, the half-truth sticking slightly in her throat. Like in fairy tales? The girl asked. Something like that, Zara replied. That evening, after their guests had departed, Ethan found Zara sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of orange and gold. The Hawkins are good folk, he said, settling into the chair beside her. Jim helped me raise the barn last spring. Martha invited me to their home next week, Zara told him. She said she has fabric for curtains she never got around to using. Ethan nodded. People look out for each other out here. Have to, with towns so far apart and winters so harsh. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the evening air cooling around them. Are you nervous? About tomorrow? Ethan finally asked. Zara considered the question. Yes, she admitted. But not in the way you might think. I'm not afraid of marrying you, Ethan. I'm afraid I won't be the wife you need. He turned to look at her, his expression serious. I don't need a perfect wife, Zara. Just an honest one. We'll figure out the rest together. The simple sincerity of his words touched something deep inside her. For the first time since arriving in Colorado, Zara felt a flutter of something beyond mere hope, something that might, with time and care, grow into love. Their wedding day dawned clear and bright. Martha Hawkins arrived early, bringing a dress she'd altered for Zara, a simple blue cotton with lace at the collar, far from the elaborate gown Zara might have worn in Philadelphia, but beautiful in its way. You look lovely, Mrs. Potter declared as she helped Zara with her hair. Ethan won't know what hit him. The ceremony took place in Ordway's small church, with the traveling preacher officiating. Only a handful of people attended the Hawkins family: Mrs. Potter, the general store owner and his wife, and a few of Ethan's ranching associates. Zara had no one on her side, a fact that might have saddened her if not for the kind welcome she'd received from Ethan's neighbors. Ethan wore a clean shirt and his best trousers, his hair neatly combed. When Zara entered the church, his eyes found hers immediately, and the admiration in his gaze gave her courage. The ceremony was brief, but meaningful. When Ethan placed the simple gold band on her finger, replacing the pretend one she'd worn on her journey, his hands were steady, his voice clear as he repeated the vows. Zara's own voice trembled slightly, but her resolve was firm. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher declared. "Mr. Russell, you may kiss your bride." Ethan's kiss was gentle, almost tentative, a question rather than a demand. When he drew back, his eyes searched hers, and Zara found herself smiling up at him, some of her anxiety melting away. The small reception was held at the town's only restaurant, where the owner had prepared a special meal in honor of the occasion. There was dancing afterward, with Jim Hawkins playing the fiddle while the children clapped along. "You're a natural," Ethan commented as he led Zara through a lively reel. "I've got 2 left feet myself." "My father taught me," Zara explained, surprised by how easily the memory came without its usual sting of grief. "He said every proper young lady should know how to dance." "Smart man, your father." As the evening wore on, Zara became increasingly aware of what awaited them at home: the wedding night. Despite their growing ease with each other, they were still virtual strangers in many ways. When they finally bid their guests goodbye and climbed into the wagon for the journey back to the ranch, Zara's nerves returned in full force. Ethan seemed to sense her tension, keeping the conversation light as they traveled beneath the star-filled sky. At the ranch, he helped her down from the wagon, then surprised her by sweeping her into his arms. "I believe this is traditional," he said, carrying her through the doorway. "Ethan, you'll hurt your back," she protested, though she couldn't help laughing. "You hardly weigh more than a sack of flour," he countered, setting her gently on her feet in the main room. Mrs. Potter had left earlier, taking her belongings back to town. The house was quiet, the embers in the fireplace casting a warm glow. "Would you like some tea?" Ethan offered, clearly trying to ease her nervousness. "That would be nice," Zara agreed, grateful for the reprieve. As they sat at the table with their steaming cups, Ethan reached across and took her hand. "Zara, I want you to know something. I don't expect... That is, there's no rush for certain aspects of marriage. I want you to be comfortable, to feel safe here." His consideration brought tears to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. When they finally retired to the bedroom, their bedroom now, Ethan respectfully turned his back while she changed into her nightgown. He had already removed his shirt, and in the lamplight, Zara could see the scars on his back, remnants of the war he rarely spoke of. They lay side by side in the darkness, a careful distance between them. "Good night, Mrs. Russell," Ethan said softly. "Good night, Mr. Russell," she replied. And despite her lingering nerves, Zara fell asleep with a sense of peace she hadn't expected to find. The weeks that followed brought a steady routine to Zara's new life. She rose early with Ethan, preparing breakfast before he headed out to tend the cattle. Her days were filled with domestic tasks: cooking, cleaning, tending the now thriving garden. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, talking about their days or sometimes just enjoying the silence together. Physical intimacy came gradually, with Ethan never pushing beyond what she was comfortable with. His patience and gentle consideration won Zara's trust and eventually her desire. When they finally consummated their marriage, nearly 2 weeks after the wedding, it was with tenderness and mutual pleasure that surprised them both. As summer gave way to fall, Zara found herself happier than she'd ever expected to be. The ranch was beginning to feel like home, and Ethan, once a stranger whose handwriting was more familiar than his face, had become her partner in all things. Not that their new life was without challenges. In late September, a sudden storm frightened the cattle, causing them to break through a section of fencing. Ethan and two hired hands spent 3 days rounding up the scattered herd, returning home exhausted and mud-soaked. "Lost 4 head," he reported grimly as Zara helped him out of his sodden clothes. "Found them in the ravine, necks broken." "I'm so sorry," she said, knowing what the loss meant to their precarious finances. "Could have been worse," he sighed. "Jim Hawkins lost 12 last winter to wolves." October brought an early snow, followed by an unexpected warm spell that turned the ranch yard into a sea of mud. November arrived with bitter winds that found every crack in the cabin's walls, sending Zara on a mission with rags and tallow to seal the worst offenders. Through it all, their bond deepened. Ethan taught Zara to ride properly and to handle a rifle just in case. She introduced him to books he'd owned but never read, reading aloud by lamplight on winter evenings. They discovered shared values, compatible temperaments, and a mutual desire to build something meaningful together. "I never thought I'd be happy here," Zara confessed one night as they lay wrapped in each other's arms. "When I stepped off that stagecoach, I was terrified." "Of me?" Ethan asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Of everything. The vastness of this place. The isolation. The thought of being tied to a man I didn't know. And now?" She pressed closer to him, savoring his warmth. "Now I can't imagine being anywhere else, or with anyone else." He kissed her forehead. "That first day, when you told me you couldn't have children, do you know what I thought?" "What?" "I thought how brave you were, to tell me straight away, knowing I might send you back." His voice grew serious. "I lost someone once, before the war. She didn't tell me she was ill until it was too late. I promised myself I'd never value honesty less than I should again." Zara thought about the photograph she'd found in his trunk while putting away laundry, a pretty girl with dark curls and a solemn expression. She'd never asked about it, sensing it was a part of his past he wasn't ready to share. "Thank you for accepting me as I am," she whispered. "Thank you for bringing life back to this place," he replied. "And to me." Winter settled in earnest, transforming the landscape into a white wilderness that glittered beneath the cold sun. Christmas approached, bringing with it a wave of homesickness that caught Zara by surprise. "We always had a tree," she explained to Ethan when he found her wiping tears away as she kneaded bread dough. "My father would bring home the biggest one he could find, and Mother would scold him for it being too large for our parlor. We'd decorate it with paper chains and candles, and on Christmas Eve, we'd sing carols." The next day, Ethan disappeared for hours, returning with a small pine tree strapped to his horse. "It's not much," he said as he set it up in the corner of their main room, "but I thought we could start our own tradition." Together they decorated the tree with paper stars Zara cut from old letters and dried apple slices she'd preserved in the fall. Ethan carved a simple angel for the top from a piece of pine wood. On Christmas morning, he presented her with a gift, a silver locket he'd ordered from the catalog months ago, finally delivered by the stagecoach the previous week. "It's beautiful," Zara breathed, opening it to find it empty. "I thought maybe someday we could put something special inside," Ethan said, "a memory worth keeping." Her gift to him was more practical, a new woolen scarf she'd knitted in secret during the long evenings, and a book of poetry she'd asked Martha Hawkins to purchase in Denver during her last visit. "No one's given me a book before," he said, turning the leather-bound volume in his hands with something like reverence. That night, as they lay in bed listening to the wind howl outside, Ethan pulled her close. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low. About what you told me when you first arrived. Zara tensed slightly. About not being able to have children? Yes. His hand found hers beneath the quilt. There are children who need homes. Orphans from the war. Kids whose parents died on the journey west. The preacher mentioned a home for such children in Denver. Hope bloomed in Zara's chest. You'd want that? To take in a child that isn't yours by blood? I'd want that, he confirmed. If you would? She turned to face him in the darkness. I would. Very much. They made plans to visit the orphanage in Denver when spring made travel easier. As winter slowly released its grip on the land, Zara found herself looking forward to the possibility of expanding their family in a way she'd never thought possible. April brought the first real thaw, turning the land green almost overnight. The cattle, thin from the long winter, began to fatten on fresh grass. In the garden, Zara's carefully tended seedlings pushed through the soil, promising summer vegetables. In May, they made the 3-day journey to Denver. The orphanage was a stark building on the outskirts of the growing city, home to nearly 30 children of various ages. The matron, a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Griffith, showed them around with efficient detachment. Most folks want babies, she informed them. Or at least girls. Boys over 5 are the hardest to place, especially if they're difficult. As if to illustrate her point, a commotion erupted in the yard, visible through the window, 2 boys scuffling while others formed a circle around them, shouting encouragement. Mrs. Griffith sighed heavily. If you'll excuse me. Left alone in the sparse office, Zara and Ethan exchanged glances. She makes it sound like we're choosing livestock, Zara whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened. No child should be warehoused like this. When Mrs. Griffith returned, dragging a boy of about 8 by the ear, Zara's heart contracted. The child's face was dirt-streaked, with a fresh bruise forming under one eye, but his expression was defiant rather than cowed. This is Samuel, Mrs. Griffith said, her tone making the name sound like an accusation. Our most frequent troublemaker. The boy glared up at her, then shifted his gaze to Zara and Ethan, wariness replacing defiance. What happened? Ethan asked, addressing the boy directly. Samuel looked surprised at being spoken to. Tommy said my ma was a whore. He answered flatly. So I hit him. Mrs. Griffith gasped. Samuel, watch your language. But Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Seems fair. Mrs. Griffith's expression suggested she doubted Ethan's fitness as a potential parent. Perhaps you'd like to meet some of our other children? We have a lovely little girl who just turned 4. Actually, Zara interrupted, something in Samuel's wary stance calling to her. We'd like to talk with Samuel a bit more, if that's all right. The woman's lips pursed in disapproval, but she nodded stiffly. As you wish. I'll give you a few minutes. She left the room, closing the door with unnecessary force. Samuel remained standing where she'd left him, his thin shoulders tense as if expecting a blow. I'm Zara, she said gently, and this is my husband, Ethan. We have a ranch in Colorado. The boy said nothing, his gaze flicking between them suspiciously. Do you like animals? Ethan asked. A slight hesitation, then a cautious nod. We've got horses, Ethan continued. Cattle too, and a cat that showed up last winter ornery thing, but good at catching mice. Do you want a kid just to work your ranch? Samuel asked suddenly, his voice challenging. No, Zara answered before Ethan could. We want a child to love. The boy's expression suggested he didn't believe her. Everyone wants something. You're right about that, Ethan agreed, surprising both Samuel and Zara. We do want something. We want a family. Zara and I can't have children of our own, but that doesn't mean we don't have room in our lives and our hearts for a child who needs a home. Samuel considered this. What if I'm not what you want? What if I fight or say bad words? Then we'll deal with it, Ethan said simply. Same as any family does? The other people sent me back, the boy admitted, his defiance slipping to reveal a glimpse of the hurt beneath. Said I was too much trouble. Zara's heart ached for him. We're not those people, Samuel. When Mrs. Griffith returned, she was shocked to find Zara and Ethan interested in adopting the very child she'd presented as a cautionary example. There were papers to sign, a nominal fee to pay, and stern warnings about Samuel's difficult nature. Through it all, the boy watched them with guarded hope, as if expecting them to change their minds at any moment. The journey back to the ranch was full of discoveries Samuel had never ridden in a wagon before, had never seen the mountains up close, had never eaten food cooked over an open fire. Each new experience seemed to chip away at his defensive shell. By the time they reached the ranch, Samuel was asking questions about the cattle, the land, and whether he'd have chores like the other boys at the orphanage. Yes, you'll have chores, Ethan confirmed as they approached the house, but you'll also have time to play, to learn, to just be a boy. And this will be your home, Zara added, for as long as you want it to be. Samuel looked up at her, uncertainty written across his face. Forever? Forever, she promised. That night, after settling Samuel in the small room they'd prepared for him, Zara found Ethan on the porch, looking up at the stars. Do you think we did the right thing? She asked, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head against his back. I do, he said without hesitation. That boy needs us. And maybe we need him too. The months that followed weren't without challenges. Samuel tested boundaries, had nightmares that woke the household, and occasionally retreated into sullen silence when overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't express. But there were also moments of pure joy the first time Samuel laughed without restraint while helping Ethan with the horses. The afternoon he proudly brought Zara wildflowers he'd picked during his explorations. The evening he fell asleep between them on the porch swing, trusting and peaceful. By Christmas, the transformation was remarkable. The wary orphan had become a boy who ran to meet Ethan when he returned from working the range, who helped Zara in the kitchen with enthusiastic if messy assistance, who had favorite books and a collection of interesting rocks and a future full of possibilities. I never thought I could love someone this much who didn't come from my own body, Zara confessed to Ethan as they watched Samuel arrange presents under their Christmas tree store, bought ones alongside handmade treasures he'd created in secret. Love doesn't care about blood, Ethan replied, squeezing her hand. It only cares about the heart. As they gathered around the fire that Christmas Eve, Samuel between them on the small sofa, Zara was struck by how completely her life had changed in less than 2 years. From lonely seamstress to beloved wife and mother, from crowded city to open prairie, from despair to hope. Tell me again how you met, Samuel requested, snuggling closer as the fire crackled. It had become his favorite story, though they'd sanitized certain aspects for his young ears. Well, Ethan began, winking at Zara. Your mother was the prettiest woman to ever step off the stagecoach in Ordway. And your father, Zara continued, was the kindest man I'd ever met. And when she told me she couldn't have children, Ethan added, his voice gentle, I said, then love will be enough, Samuel finished for him, the familiar words a comforting ritual. That's right, Ethan confirmed, reaching across to take Zara's hand. And it has been. More than enough. Zara's eyes met her husband's across their son's head, and the love she saw there reflected her own. Not the passionate infatuation of storybooks, but something deeper and more enduring, a love built day by day, choice by choice, through hardship and joy alike. As the snow fell softly outside their snug home, Zara silently thanked whatever twist of fate had led her to answer an advertisement from a lonely rancher in Colorado. Their family might not look like what either of them had once imagined, But it was perfect in its own way, a testament to the truth that sometimes, when life closes one door, it opens another even more beautiful than you could have dreamed.